Now this is an encouraging sight. It's good to see you, so many of you, face to face after 2 years. It's been a grueling 2 years. I think historians will spend decades trying to understand what happened and what happened to us during 20 and 21. I doubt our society has been rocked by this much danger and this much change and in such a short time since the attack on Pearl Harbor 80 years ago. But here we are on the other side of the pandemic, watching it fade away into the rearview mirror, God willing. Despite the constant threat of infection and lockdowns and shutdowns and social distancing, all y'all didn't throw in the towel. For those of you who are Southern impaired, all y'all is the plural of y'all. You kept on helping victims of crime any way you could. I've heard some great stories about the work you've done during the pandemic. For example, there is a case handled by Therese Elliott, the victim advocate for Coshocton County Prosecutor's Office. At the end of March last year, two people, Sean and Robin O'Neill, were riding their motorcycle when an oncoming vehicle crossed the center line, forcing them off the road. The couple was thrown into a ditch and horribly injured. Mrs. O'Neill suffered a traumatic injury to her left leg that required it to be amputated at the knee. Mr. O'Neill sustained head injuries. His back was broken in several places, along with his left ankle. The driver of the other vehicle fled the scene without any concern as to the welfare of the two people she had just ridden off the road. Eventually, the driver and a passenger were identified and indicted on a variety of felonies. Elliott, the victim's advocate, has stuck with the family from the beginning of the case, with the parents in treatment and rehabilitation for months. She was the counselor and guide for the family, sympathetic listener as they shared their medical, emotional, and financial struggles. Finally, this past March, the O'Neills were awarded $30,000 in crime compensation funds, and just a few weeks ago, the driver pleaded no contest and is awaiting sentencing. As a victim advocate, Therese Elliott didn't just go the extra mile, she went the extra light year. She helped the kids navigate this whole horrible situation, aided with their life when their parents weren't able to. Dad wasn't able to go back to work. He's confined to a wheelchair. She helped them sign up for Vine and explained all the things that wouldn't make much sense to most people, much less children trying to navigate. Thank you, Therese. I can't imagine how hard it would have been to stick with that family through all of that time. You know, domestic violence doesn't just injure and traumatize people, it does the same to their pets. Now, I'm going to confess to you, we've had a pet dog in my family most of my life. I'm not a real huge pet person. I'm not. It's not that I hate them, and I don't tell dead cat jokes, but it's not where I come from. But I recognize that for many people, that's a critical bond, and particularly for some who have grown up in an environment where every relationship represents abuse, where every person is somebody who's going to leave and can't be trusted. A pet can be the one source of stability, the one source of acceptance in a very tumultuous life. Well, we know that one of the reasons that abuse victims remain in bad relationships, just one, is that they fear what will happen to their pet if they leave. Abusers know this too and use threats against pets as another cruel way to dominate and manipulate their victims. I still remember the first time I heard of this and was shocked that somebody could be so cruel as to threaten harm to a little animal as a means of controlling another human being. But I learned lots of things when I was a prosecuting attorney that amazed me. Well, there's 2 domestic violence shelters operated by Ohio Guidestone who understand that helping abused family members means helping all members of the family, including the 4-legged ones. And since 2020, Harbor House and Harbor Point have sheltered 19 dogs and 10 cats, providing them with food and vet care. And by doing this, they provide peace of mind to the pet owners, emotional comfort to pets and humans alike, and best of all, take away a barrier to leaving that abusive relationship. To some people, this might seem frivolous, and it might have seemed frivolous to this hard-boiled prosecutor at one point. But I know better because I've seen what it means. And I appreciate the work that Harbor House and Harbor Point have done. I also want to mention briefly our CASA volunteers around Ohio. I'm not going to name names because I want to preserve their confidentiality, but I do want to acknowledge and celebrate the work that they do. Probably the most single effective way we could cure almost all of the intractable social problems that we have would be to ensure that every child is raised with stability and love. Adverse childhood experiences play a role in virtually every problem you want to name. Abuse, mental illness, drug addiction, teen pregnancy, human trafficking, violence, crime. And while we're nowhere close to guaranteeing a happy childhood to every child, we can reduce the trauma that they experience and give them hope for a better life ahead. That's the role that our CASA volunteers play. For some children, removed from troubled homes and bounced from one family to the next, the only consistent, committed, caring adult in their lives might be a CASA volunteer. That's the person who's there to listen to them, to stand with them in court proceedings, to monitor their welfare, and to be their advocate, their voice, when no one else is. COVID, like everything else, greatly complicated that work because lockdowns, social distancing requirements made it much harder to meet and stay in touch. And CASA's used Zoom to overcome that, like a lot of us. And like let me ask you this, it's a rhetorical question, I know, but I want to see you raise your hands. If you had a choice between doing a Zoom meeting about somebody you cared about and seeing them in person, how many people would prefer to see them in person? All of us, right? It's good to be back with you. Well, there was a teenage girl in Summit County, isolated in a foster home. She was doing virtual school on her tablet. Her counseling was on the tablet. Everything was on the tablet. Other teenagers in the foster home were bullying her, making fun of her, making her feel further isolated, as though foster care in and of itself is not enough of an isolating experience. The CASA involved here, who again I'm not going to name, made it went through the difficult process and put herself out to meet with this teen in person outside, because that's the only way it could happen. And that's what this teen needed. 6 feet apart, met protocol, socially distant, but going the extra mile. I just want to thank all of the CASA volunteers who have overcome those kinds of obstacles and have not given up during the past 2 years. We've got over 16,000 kids out there in foster care, and they all need that kind of a positive touch. Now, it's fitting that the title, the theme of our conference today is resilience. Resilience. Resilience is more than true grit. Now, don't get me wrong, every one of you has shown true grit in the last 2 years. There are moments and have been moments, and there will continue to be moments, because the work you do is difficult and emotionally draining work that will sap every ounce of energy and empathy and compassion out of your bones. But true grit's not enough. While there are moments that, yes, you've just got to gut it up and go do something that you don't even think you have the ability to take the next step to open the door and go out there, and you have to do it anyway, and somehow you find the strength in you to do that by sheer willpower. That is not resiliency. And as many of us have found out or seen happen to coworkers, if that's all you got, if that's all you bring to the table is the strength of will and the drive to keep going forward and put one foot in front of the other, eventually you're going to burn out. You're going to crash and burn, and you're going to be as much in need of help as any person you've ever reached out to. No, resiliency is something profoundly more, and you're going to hear a lot about it from people who do this for a living, that are a lot smarter and a lot more educated than I am. But when I look out here, what I see is not only that will to power, that strength, that grit to keep going. I see wisdom. Because you see, resiliency is not just to show strength and exercise strength on behalf of another, although it's those things. It's knowing where you find your strength and how to get it back, because you spend it daily in your work. And just like we have to know when we spend money where we can go get more money, hopefully the Voca fix. That was a joke, folks. You have to be able to know where to go, where to turn in those moments when you are utterly empty. And we find that in many ways. We find it from each other, which is one of the reasons why this conference is so important. Because these 2 days, we will gain strength from each other. We will refill the reservoir of our compassion. We will reignite the embers that have died down of our caring for other people. We will widen our vision. But we also find it from learning to see the beauty around us when we rush by it so often, learning to stop. We gain resilience from gratitude and counting our blessings, to use an old phrase, that every one of us has them. We gain resilience by remembering where we came from, remembering the road we have been on, remembering the road that those that we help traveled and how they overcame. and we look inside and above to our faith. That's resilience. Not just being strong enough to put one foot in front of the other, but knowing how to draw strength to make that possible. Not that you never fall, not even that you always get up after you fall, but more importantly, that you have a mission, a journey, a destination in mind, and that vision itself strengthens you. It's been a hard 2 years. And for everybody here, it's been a hard career. None of you has an easy job. I want you to know how grateful I am from the bottom of my heart that I celebrate who you are, what you do, but even more the fact that you embody and carry out the mission that we talk about in the Attorney General's office to do big good.